Woman, you are not created to live in torment, confusion, or unrest. You are designed by God to be a carrier of peace, a vessel of virtue, and an agent of divine influence in the earth. But the enemy has always tried to disturb what God established. He knows that if he can corrupt your inner world, he can control your outer one. That's why there are certain things, evil things you must confront and remove before they silently destroy the peace you were born to live in. Peace is not a suggestion. It is your spiritual inheritance. But to receive peace, you must evict what is hostile to it. The first enemy is unforgiveness. When you hold on to pain from the past, you chain yourself to moments God already set you free from. You cannot walk into a peaceful future while dragging the corpses of dead relationships. Let it go. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is not surrender to the offender. It is surrender to the healer. The second is comparison. You were not designed to be a replica. God did not make you to measure your worth by another woman's achievements, appearance, or accolades. You are a designer's original. The moment you begin comparing, you insult the intelligence of your creator. Peace cannot live where jealousy breathes. The third is toxic connections. If peace is your goal, then discernment must be your weapon. There are people who do not deserve access to your heart. Some were assigned not by God, but by distraction. You must be bold enough to walk away from anything that contaminates your spirit. Peace is not just the absence of noise, it's the presence of alignment. Then there is the battlefield of your own mind. Negative self-talk. Woman, what have you been saying to yourself? Your words create worlds. If your internal dialogue is laced with defeat, fear, and self-hatred, you will sabotage the very peace you're praying for. Speak what God has spoken about you. Let your mouth agree with heaven. Pride and the need to control everything is another silent peace killer. You were never meant to carry what only God can manage. Trust requires surrender. Many women carry unnecessary burdens because they don't trust the timeline of God. But peace is born in surrender. When you release control, you make room for divine intervention. Bitterness is another seed of destruction. It starts small, just a bruise on your heart, but if left unchecked, it grows into a tree that casts shadows over your whole life. Bitterness blocks blessings. It poisons your perception. You cannot walk in peace while carrying resentment like armor. Drop the armor, heal the wound. Lastly, the fear of being alone. Loneliness is not a curse. It is a season. And seasons change. But if you feel solitude, you will settle for chaos in the name of companionship. Some women stay in drama because silence makes them feel unloved. But woman, God is in the stillness. You are not alone. You are being prepared. You must protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. Your peace is tied to your purpose. When your heart is still, your spirit can hear. When your soul is calm, God can speak. And when you remove these evil things, what remains is a woman strong, whole, and dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Unforgiveness is a silent destroyer that hides behind smiles and busy routines. It is the chain that keeps a woman tied to her past, even when her body is walking into the future. It does not ask for permission. It settles quietly in the heart, creating invisible walls that block love, joy, and inner peace. Many women carry deep wounds, betrayals, rejections, harsh words, disappointments, and they have learned to live with them as if they are part of who they are. But holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It consumes you from the inside out, affecting your emotions, your health, and even your prayers. What unforgiveness does is far deeper than a temporary feeling. It hardens your heart, distorts your perspective and creates spiritual congestion. You begin to see everyone through the lens of your pain. You become guarded, bitter, and suspicious, not because of what people are doing, but because of what you haven't released. Peace cannot exist in a heart full of unresolved anger. God cannot heal what you still cling to. The truth is, forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. It doesn't say what they did was right. It says you refuse to let it have power over your future. A woman who refuses to forgive becomes a prisoner to a moment she cannot change. And every time she rehearses the offense in her mind, she reopens the wound and delays her healing. Forgiveness is the door to freedom. It is the decision to stop allowing the past to write your present. It requires courage, not emotion. If you wait to feel like forgiving, you'll stay stuck forever. It is a choice you make in obedience to God, so you can reclaim the peace that rightfully belongs to you. Comparison with others is one of the most subtle and dangerous thieves of peace. It creeps in silently, often through the scroll of a screen or the glance of an eye, and begins to whisper lies into a woman's soul. It tells her she's not enough, that her beauty is less, her accomplishments too small, her life too quiet. It convinces her that someone else's highlight reel is a reflection of her failure. And the moment she begins to measure her worth against another, she steps outside of her divine identity and begins to chase shadows that were never meant to define her. God never intended for two women to look alike, live alike, or shine alike. You were not designed to compete. You were designed to complete a divine assignment. Comparison turns friends into rivals, blessings into burdens, and purpose into pressure. It steals gratitude and replaces it with envy. And when you live with envy in your heart, peace cannot remain. The soul begins to strive instead of rest, to perform instead of grow, to impress instead of become. And slowly, a woman loses sight of her original design because she's trying to duplicate someone else's. What makes you powerful is not how you match up with another woman, but how you align with your Creator's intention for your life. The moment you start comparing, you stop celebrating. And what you do not celebrate, you disconnect from. Comparison births insecurity. And insecurity gives way to anxiety, fear, and spiritual exhaustion. You must understand that your value is not up for debate. You were fearfully and wonderfully made, not fearfully and competitively made. There is no peace in pretending. There is no joy in imitation. True peace begins when you look in the mirror and say, I am who God says I am, and that is enough. Toxic relationships are like silent assassins of peace. They don't always come with loud arguments or visible abuse. Sometimes they wear the mask of familiarity, comfort, or even love, while draining the soul of its strength and stability. A toxic relationship is any connection that constantly pulls you away from your purpose, dims your light, and poisons your emotional and spiritual health. It's not always about what people do to you. Sometimes it's what they keep you from becoming. And many women stay in these relationships not because they are blind, but because they are afraid to be alone, afraid to start over, afraid to confront the truth. God never designed relationships to be prisons. They are supposed to build, support, and align with your destiny. But when you remain tied to someone who belittles your worth, manipulates your emotions, or hinders your growth, you begin to lose sight of who you are. You start adjusting your dreams, silencing your voice, and shrinking your spirit just to keep the peace, a peace that isn't even real. That's not love. That's bondage. And the longer you stay, the more you confuse pain with loyalty. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of divine order. Any relationship that keeps you in a cycle of confusion, emotional instability, or spiritual dryness is not in divine order. You cannot carry dead weight and run your race. You cannot entertain dysfunction and expect clarity. Sometimes the most spiritual thing a woman can do is walk away, not out of hate, but out of obedience. Not because she stopped loving, but because she started healing. You are not called to fix everyone. You are called to fulfill your purpose. And sometimes protecting your peace means closing the door to what God has already asked you to let go of. Negative self-talk is one of the most dangerous conversations a woman can have because it happens in silence behind closed doors where no one else can correct it but her. It's the inner voice that says, I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. No one will love me. I can't do this. These words don't come from heaven. They come from past wounds, broken environments, or fear-driven thinking. And every time you agree with those lies, you give them permission to shape your life. A woman's greatest enemy is not always around her. Sometimes it's the voice within her. Your words have power. They are spiritual tools designed either to build or destroy. When you speak negatively to yourself, you are planting seeds of defeat in the soil of your mind. Over time, those seeds take root and grow into strongholds, limiting beliefs that control your choices, your relationships, and your confidence. You start playing small because you believe you are small. You stop trying because you've already convinced yourself you'll fail. You reject love because you believe you're unworthy. And slowly your peace disappears, not because of what others say, but because of what you keep saying to yourself. You must align your mouth with God's mind. He never called you weak, broken, or worthless. He called you fearfully and wonderfully made, chosen, beloved, and purposed. If your inner language does not reflect His truth, then it must be changed. You cannot live in peace while hosting the voice of your enemy inside your own head. What you declare over yourself becomes what you believe, and what you believe becomes your reality. Speak life, speak healing, speak truth. A transformed life begins with a renewed mind, and a renewed mind begins with words that agree with your divine identity. Pride and control are two subtle forces that often disguise themselves as strength, but in reality, they are rooted in fear and mistrust. Many women hold tightly to control because they are afraid of being hurt again, afraid of things falling apart, afraid that if they don't handle everything, no one else will. But control is not peace. It is pressure. It is the burden of trying to be God in your own life. Pride says, I don't need help. Control says, I must do it all. And both create an internal war that steals rest, invites anxiety, and blocks the flow of grace. Pride doesn't always come with arrogance. Sometimes it shows up in the refusal to ask for help, the need to always be right, or the unwillingness to admit vulnerability. It convinces you that surrender is weakness. But in the kingdom of God, surrender is strength. True peace can only come when you acknowledge that you are not the source, you are the vessel. And vessels must remain open to be filled. A woman who is full of pride cannot be full of peace. Because peace requires trust. Trust in God's timing. Trust in His process. Trust that even when things are beyond your control, they are not beyond His. Control creates illusions. You might feel powerful, but underneath there's tension, fear, and constant striving. You second-guess people. You overthink decisions. You carry responsibilities that were never assigned to you. And in trying to hold everything together, you fall apart on the inside. But peace comes when you release. When you say, God, I trust you more than I trust my own plans. That's not giving up, that's growing up. It's moving from independence to divine dependence. And in that place of surrender, peace is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you carry. Bitterness and resentment are emotional toxins that slowly erode the soul. They begin with a wound, a betrayal, a disappointment, a harsh word. But if left unhealed, that wound hardens into a grudge, and the grudge matures into bitterness. Many women carry the residue of past hurts, not on their skin, but in their spirit. They function in life, but something deep within them is closed, guarded, and angry. Bitterness doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's quiet, polite, and smiling, while internally the heart is cold and the peace has vanished. Resentment is a silent war that you fight every day, replaying offenses in your mind and keeping score in your heart. It convinces you that staying angry is a form of protection. But in reality, it's a form of self-destruction. You become emotionally locked to the person or situation that hurt you, giving it continued power over your joy. The longer you hold it, the heavier it becomes. And that heaviness begins to impact your relationships, your outlook, and your ability to trust. You can't receive fresh love while clinging to old pain. You can't walk freely when you're dragging yesterday's battles. Bitterness blinds you to beauty. It filters your perception until everything looks suspicious. It chokes compassion and silences gratitude. A bitter heart becomes a hardened heart, and a hardened heart is difficult for even God's truth to penetrate. Peace cannot grow in poisoned soil. You must choose to uproot the bitterness, not because they deserve it, but because your future does. Healing doesn't begin when justice is served. Healing begins when you stop letting pain define your identity. Resentment keeps you stuck in cycles that peace cannot enter. When you finally release what wounded you, you don't lose, you win back your power, your clarity, and your connection to divine peace. Fear of being alone is one of the most deceptive traps that keeps many women bound to situations, people, and environments that no longer serve their growth. It whispers lies that say you are incomplete without someone beside you, that solitude is punishment, and that if you let go, you will end up forgotten. But the truth is, loneliness is not the same as being alone. Loneliness is a feeling, but being alone can be a divine appointment. God often calls his daughters into seasons of solitude, not to punish them, but to prepare them, to strip away distractions, to heal hidden wounds, and to reveal their true identity apart from people's approval. When a woman fears being alone, she begins to tolerate things that break her. She entertains relationships that drain her, conversations that confuse her, and patterns that diminish her, all to avoid the silence that might confront her. But what she doesn't realize is that peace thrives in stillness. Growth happens in quiet. Wholeness is birthed in isolation. You cannot hear the voice of God clearly while clinging to noise for comfort. Many settle for emotional chaos simply because it feels familiar and the unknown silence feels threatening. But solitude is sacred. It is the place where God reshapes your mind, affirms your worth, and restores your confidence, not in another person, but in him. When you no longer fear your own company, you discover a strength that no relationship can give and no rejection can take away. You realize that being alone is not a deficiency, it's a season of becoming. Peace does not come from people. It comes from alignment with purpose. And sometimes peace waits for the moment you stop running from yourself and start embracing the woman God has been trying to introduce you to all along. Woman, your peace is too precious to be traded for pain, fear, or the approval of others. You were not created to live in emotional chaos, spiritual confusion, or internal torment. You were created to walk in divine order with a clear mind, a steady heart, and a spirit anchored in truth. But peace is not automatic. It is protected. It is preserved by the decisions you make daily to release what God never gave you, to confront what keeps you bound, and to remove what pollutes your soul. The enemy is not always outside of you. Sometimes it is the unforgiveness you refuse to release, the comparisons you entertain, the voices you allow, the relationships you won't let go of, and the fears you never challenge. But today you have the power to choose. You can choose healing over history. You can choose growth over guilt. You can choose faith over fear. And above all, you can choose peace over pressure. Stop waiting for someone else to fix what only obedience to God can restore. Clean the chambers of your heart. Uproot the things that steal your joy. Cut off what weakens your identity. This is your time, not to just survive, but to reign in peace. Because a woman who protects her peace becomes unstoppable, unshakable, and undeniably powerful in the hands of God. Let nothing and no one rob you of that. Peace is not a luxury. It is your divine right. Guard it fiercely.